Welcome. Quote Me on That podcast is an initiative of Quote This Woman Plus. Quote This Woman Plus, also referred to as QW Plus, is a gender justice organization that links women plus experts to the media. Quote Me on That introduces our women plus experts to the world.
My name is Janae Sparks and I'll be your host. And today's guest is a force. Bold, brilliant, and unapologetically a change maker of note, Dr. Shakira Choonara is a public health practitioner, gender rights activist, and an award-winning change maker whose voice cuts through the noise and gets to the heart of justice. It is absolutely amazing to have you here. And in this episode, we're going to talk about feminist leadership, breaking barriers in public health, and what it truly means to make space and take space as a young woman of color within this space of power that you carry. So let's get into it. Welcome.
Thanks, Renee. It's such an exciting topic and looking forward to delving further into it.
Fantastic. So the first thing, you are known as a fierce voice in public health and gender justice. Where did your activism begin?
So that takes me back, I think, decades ago, because I'm now in my 30s, but, my really early formative years. And it's a story I've told often, but it's also a difficult story. And essentially, I grew up in a disadvantaged background in South Africa, but also my father was visually impaired. And what this meant is that it's not just the person who lives with a disability, but the family is affected as well. So school was out of my reach. University was out of my reach, for example. But I also grew up seeing the public healthcare system in South Africa and what it was. And being surrounded by stigma, by discrimination, by inequality, by racism, by injustice, it really ignited within me, how do I solve the world's problems? And ever since then, you don't think about it at that time. But as you sort of go through your young professional years, you realize how all of this has essentially shaped what you stand for and what you do.
Wow, that is incredible. My next question was going to do why you do what you do, but I mean, you've already unpacked that within the space. I mean, we know you as, showcasing and embodying feminist leadership. I think when you speak about feminist leadership, what does it mean to you beyond buzzwords? And I think this is a question I often ask because we use a lot of terminology out there. And I'll probably get back to what you spoke about now in kind of what drives you. But if we could just take it this way a little bit, what does it mean to you beyond the buzzwords?
Feminism, or the fight for feminism and gender equality, goes back centuries. It's not something that's new. And I want to commend every single feminist through the centuries who's fought for us to get to this point where we are. And I don't think we're at a perfect point, but we are making tremendous progress, which is now, of course, at risk. But the way I see it is it's the real issues, right? And so, of course, as many of you know, it's the barriers to education. I do believe education is highly transformational. I believe I'm a living example of that. I do believe that, social structures which support women is important in communities. And then, of course, it's even as you go through the workplace or as you go through universities, or even if you're unemployed, and so many women work in the informal economy as well. So it's the rights that go alongside with that. So I do believe it's the broader scheme of human rights, strong constitutions, gender equality at the policy level, the framework level, but then it's also at the tangible level and the real level. And how much are we investing? Are we walking the talk? Sometimes it doesn't have to be major programs and major investments, but it's in the workplace, it's in the university environment, it's in the colleges where it's strong sexual harassment or anti-sexual harassment and gender-based violence, programs and policies. It's also, for example, and it was interesting, now you're making me think of my university years as well, is while you're studying, if you fall pregnant or you're subject to motherhood, so we motherhood factor affects women getting into those leadership spaces. So are there investments to support women who go through motherhood? And then, of course, there's also the data which shows us. When I worked at the World Health Organization, one of my colleagues and several partners had led a comprehensive report on women in the healthcare sector. And they found that there was approximately a 20% pay gap between male and female healthcare workers at different categories. And so that feeds through to different organizations and sectors as well, but we're not focusing on it. So in a nutshell, I would say it's the strong policies, the strong frameworks, but it's also the tangibles. And I'm thinking of one of my supervisors who was so supportive of mothers who were in our unit. And he would say, take the days off, or don't come in on this day if you've got to take your child to school. And even in my current environment, they allow us to work slightly or start slightly later because, of course, women are taking children to school. But, it's not just women. I also want to say that feminist leadership includes gender diverse populations. So I'll stop there for now because I could possibly, hopefully, write a book one day.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I had recently addressed a group of people studying at the University of Stellenbosch. They're talking about gender, and what you've just given now is just so amazing, because I can already see how these future public health practitioners and leaders could learn something about the way that you're seeing feminist leadership. And I think it's such it's something we're talking about all the time now, because we're starting to question, yes, this is how things have been going. We're looking at data. Data is driving whether we're going in this direction or the next, or whether what we've built up until now is sufficient. What else can we do? So you've given us a lot of food for thought there, and thank you. And thank you for bringing in those nuances around, women that have to care for their kids and families, and then, of course, gender diverse population. So that's fantastic that you've brought all of those together. I want to go back to when you were telling us about your story, and I think I didn't give it enough time to kind of grapple with. But you're speaking about where you've come from, the struggles that you've had. And so I'm wanting to ask, how did you then manage to overcome those? Because you spoke about, not thinking that university or further education would be part of your story, but it is. So how did you manage to actually navigate that?
Well, I mean, we go through struggles and we continue to go through struggles, and that's part of life and human nature. I did speak a little bit about education, and for me, I think education was fundamental. It was transformational. It was really my ticket out of that cycle of poverty, in a sense, if you think about it. But I also pin that down to really strong social policies that we have in South Africa as a country, and I'm so proud of that, because there was, and I don't know what the landscape and the system is at this point, but there was support for families who require subsidies to have their children go through school. So I'm a living and breathing example of that. Coming to university as well, I was, I'm quite shocked to see some of the funding situation that's happening at the moment. But even at university, I benefited from numerous bursaries and scholarships. I do think that was highly important and highly transformational in allowing me to be employed, but also doing the work that I do. Other than that, I would also say that, being among like-minded individuals and networks and people who lift you up has also been really, really critical and important throughout my formative years, but as I jumped into my 20s and 30s as well. I'm thinking here of grassroots networks, the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, which as part of as a very young person and mentored by veteran Ahmed Kathrada and many others. And, so that also shaped my resilience, my vision, the ability to think bigger, and also think about what can you change, because there's two things to change and to overcome in life. And the one is your own personal struggles, but the broader struggles that society has. And so I think for me, those two are so intertwined, and being part of these networks, working with different change makers across South Africa, Africa, and globally, I do believe that also supported in overcoming the struggles. And that's why I talked about people who have lifted me up. You know, sometimes you just need that one person to believe in you, that one person to have faith in you. You just need, I had a professor at university at my very early stage of my PhD. He had said, you're going to do your PhD one day. And actually, I completed my PhD. And more recently, I was talking a lot about the World Health Organization, which is unfortunately going through so much of blows, or there's so many blows against the World Health Organization at the moment. But I spent 4 years of my career there. And one of my mentors and supervisors has always said in meetings, one day you're going to be the Assistant Director General, the Director General. Or sometimes I've walked into rooms and other women in my space have said, meet Shakira, she's the future director of UNAIDS. So I think, it's the education, it's the networks, but it's also the people around you who build and foster you as a leader.
Yeah, that is amazing. That is so amazing. My next question was going to be around how do we make room for women, especially young leaders, to thrive in sectors dominated by patriarchal norms? And I think you've already given such a lot there. I mean, but I think it's something for mentors to think about, and it's something for us as women leaders to think about is, do I actually create that space for someone else? Or do I also just, because it's, in the current climate, it's quite easy to see people kind of just holding to themselves at the moment. But I mean, this is probably the best time for women in leadership to create a space next to you for someone else. But I'd like to hear your views on that.
I think it's twofold, or maybe threefold, and even more complicated than that. So, of course, I talk about investments, and I'm very serious about it. I think you've got to have young women leadership programs. You've got to have employment equity programs. You've got to invest in creating that young women health, or not even just a female-led youth workforce, essentially. So it's the investments in education, the investments in employment, also the investments in entrepreneurship. It's not simple to become an entrepreneur. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a long-term sustained investment. So for me, investments are critical. So that's more macro level, and within organizations as well. But I also think that the more micro level is what we're doing in the spaces that we're in. So in our families, it's really important. What are we teaching those who are coming after us? What's the gender norms in our household? I always, for example, my nieces know me very well, and sometimes when their parents say to them, do this and that, and they said, is it because I'm a woman? Why is my brother not doing this?
I love that.
So I do think the gender norms in our own personal spaces are so important, in our spaces with our social interactions are important. But then also in the workplace, there's different ways to do this. And like I said, I have wonderful things to say about so many mentors I've had the opportunity to work with. It's the softer things, the intangibles, the kind words, the faith, the support, that I'm helping lifting you up, or I'm supporting you to be who you are, not really helping you lift up. And then I'm happy to speak a little bit about some of my own practices. And because I've been in environments which I believe were toxic, but then I've also been in wonderful environments. And so I've learned the difference of how to be a leader in the workplace, and what do you do and who do you focus on. And Renee, your question's really on young women leaders. And if you go to organizations, even if they have internship programs, even if they have leadership programs, how often does an executive or senior manager sit down with those who've entered the organization? Very rarely. And I think that's wonderful practice. So even myself, as I work in various global health spaces, I know that women from the global south are moving to New York. I know they're moving to Europe for the first time. I know that the system is daunting, and I expect nothing in return. I reach out to them, I support them, and it's just incredible. Just 2 weeks ago, I had said to one of the young women, I would like you to speak in the meeting. Can you facilitate it? She called me the day before and she was stressed. I'm nervous and I don't know how I'm going to do this, Shakira. And we spoke and I gave her a bit of a pep talk and I said, you power dress, you show everyone you know what you're doing. And you know what? The next day, she was so brilliant, Renee. So sometimes it's also not, I was just thinking about it. It's not just these big, bold things that change the world. It's the little things. It's the intangibles. It's the way you treat people and the way you support people, which I believe then nurtures the next generation.
That is amazing. And I think thank you for highlighting that you've been in both a beautiful space and a toxic space. Because sometimes when we look at women leaders, we think, oh, you must have had it easy, and you don't realize, well, actually, they've gone through the same struggles you have. They've seen the same spaces you have. And it's beautiful when you can then share that. And also the fact that you can mentor and help others kind of find their way and they'll end up doing the same. Hopefully they'll be paying it forward as well. So that's an amazing way of looking at it. So you have been listed among powerful women to watch, right? How do you handle the visibility in activist spaces?
For me, it's something I've embraced and I appreciate. Because I believe that it gives me a platform to say things and to advance things. And so it's not something that I take lightly. I really do think about what I'm saying, how I'm saying, who am I saying it to, and what it's going to push. And so with that comes enormous power and responsibility, I believe. And it's important. And it's not, like I said, it's not something I just take for granted. And it goes back to what I also said earlier. It's not just about me. It's about the issues that I'm advocating for. Of course, there are, as we live in the times that we live in, it's become increasingly scary from an online perspective, our safety, the types of comments, the negative feedback that you get. And so managing that has been interesting, but it's not something I pay too much of attention to. And for me, it's always been about, yes, the platforms are there and I'm really privileged to have these platforms. How do I push what needs to be pushed? But how do I also get other women to be in these spaces as well? So for me, it's really, really been incredible. And, going forward, all of the injustices that are happening in the world right now, I had said to someone, I'm very happy to be the boldest, biggest face for human rights across the world, because that's what the world needs right now. It's not something you shy away from. And I think that's just going to be critical for all of us going forward.
Oh my word. You've just struck the next question, because it's all about the space we're in and just how the face of our activism and advocacy has kind of got to change to address the current status. So you often challenge traditional models of power. How do you define disruption in this day and age, and how do you live with that? How do you kind of live and breathe and embody that?
So it's been interesting because I've been in the civil society space, I've been in the academic space, I've now been in the multilateral/international space. And I think that you can champion it in different ways. I think that the attacks on science are absolutely scary right now. They leave me chilled. They leave me upset. They leave me disappointed and very concerned about the state of the world, because the dismantling of science and progressive language and the evidence then takes away everything. So I think our fight's got to be for the sciences right now. Then, of course, I think in civil society organizations, what we're seeing is the rapid defunding of organizations, the closing of CSO doors. It's always been difficult to work in civil society. It's always been unfunded. And so it's such a pity that we're now going to possibly have to regress to unpaid activism again. And, that's a debate all by itself. But what I mean by that is that people will now not have remuneration for the advocacy work that they do. And so that's, I do believe that. But also thinking about it, there was a young woman a few weeks ago. I was at a climate and health meeting, and she said, it's about time that these large international organizations learn how to work efficiently with their resources. We in the global south, sitting in Latin America, we operate on a $5,000 budget for the entire year, and we do X amount of programs. So I think, the rejigging and the thinking about how we do things is going to be important. I think at the international space, there's threats now to the Sustainable Development Goals, there's threats to human rights language. As a South African, I'm so disappointed and disheartened to see it. And so the role to change things is to stand up and say the SDGs are there, human rights are there, we're not negotiating on this. And so I think we've got really, really tough times ahead before we see the light. I'm not going to underplay that. And I do think that all sectors need to come together. I think all of us need to come together. I think we need to really be serious about collaborating right now, and thinking about what we push against and how we push against. And, even thinking about female leaders who sit in parliaments and who are in member states. They also play an important role in gaining political roles. So I think political will. I think all of us have a role to play. I just think it's going to take us some time to organize, but we need to actively think about how to do that.
No, absolutely. Goodness. Yeah, so that's you on being very real on the current situation. And it is. I just had a conversation recently with 3 colleagues that come from funded spaces who have now been unemployed since February. So it's really, really scary to think that you have all this healthcare workers, and there was a need for them to begin with. But you are right. We are given this opportunity now to rethink solutions and sustainable solutions. And I can't agree with you enough. I think the word collaboration for the longest while has just been another buzzword. And this is the first time we're going to ask, put your, I don't want to say put your money where your mouth is, but actually show up and do what you need to do here. So that's fantastic. We are getting to the last question, and it is, what would you want a young change maker listening to this to remember or to take action on today?
I mean, Renee, the current situation that's happening around the world, it's weighing very heavily on me, very heavily on me. And so if I'm at an advanced sort of stage of my career, I can only imagine how scary it must be at this point to graduate, or at this point to think about a career in healthcare or career in development. And so any young change maker out there, I don't want to force the responsibility on you, but I want to say that in every point of history, whenever there's been injustice, who stands up? It's young people. And so the world needs you now more than ever, and we need to stand up now more than ever.
Think you so much. And that has been the voice of Dr. Shakira Choonara on we all have to show up. I love that call to action. I don't even think, not even, yes, young leaders, those of us who've been around the block, make the spaces, create the opportunities for those people, create opportunities for everyone within our space to actually show up and be able to contribute. And let's see what solutions we have. And yes, definitely not with romanticizing the idea that it will happen quickly. We know this is going to be a hard road for us ahead. But thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, sharing some of your insights. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you, Shakira. And we look forward to seeing what's going to come, what you're going to be doing in the future, and just how bold you'll be showing up for us in terms of justice. And we will be alongside you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. You rock. Quote This Woman Rocks. I have been reflecting a lot on what's next for me. And for me, whether it's paid or unpaid, I see my responsibility and my calling for helping the world weather the storm that we're going through. And whatever that looks like, I don't know. But I talked about trying to be the biggest, boldest space of activism at this time, and not for myself, but because I think it's needed. And so thank you, and wishing you and everyone strength and solidarity. A luta continua.
Thank you so much.